In September 1937, the war drove Liang Sicheng and Lin Huiyin from Beiping into what would be a long period of exile.
Auntie Wilma, are you doing well? My mom, dad, and I are all well. I miss you so. We're now getting ready to go to Changsha. Tsinghua University is moving there, so we are going too. What do you think? Is Uncle John well too? See you later.
Lin had hastily scribbled a few words on the edges of the letter.
So much has happened. We don't know how to begin telling. Anyway, we're safe. Came to Tianjin a week ago and are leaving by boat to Qingdao, Jinan, to wherever we can reach.
Only 2 months earlier, a wooden building from the Tang Dynasty had appeared. Yet this seemingly miraculous event turned out to coincide with a national nightmare. For 7 years, these ambitious scholars traveled across China pursuing new heights in the study of architectural history. However, just as they were achieving these accomplishments, war descended upon the country. The institute was forced to leave. They carefully entrusted the materials of field research, including structural sketches, film negatives from architectural photos, to the underground vault of a foreign bank in the British concession of Tianjin. There they deposited their life and their future. In August 1937, Beiping fell to Japan's troops. Before leaving Beiping, Lin Huiyin, with lung disease, was given a physical exam. The doctor sternly warned her against any tiring travel. She wrote to the author Shen Zhongwen, "The warning is in vain. My life is up to the will of heaven now." The year she left Beiping, Lin Huiyin was only 33 years old. Yet the best chapter of her life was silently coming to a close. The country is disintegrating, and a great exile has begun. Our once peaceful and affluent life has been instantly transformed into a few pieces of luggage bumping along behind us. Amid the roar of artillery, universities are either moving to the west or to the south, away from the front lines of the war. Professors, students, children, elders, boxes of books and instruments, and even precious breeds of cattle and sheep that agronomists can't bear to abandon, have all converged into a river of misery, slowly swamping the lands of China.
Since the Marco Polo Bridge incident, we have traveled all the railways of China. With our luggage, our children, my old mother, boarding boats or trains a total of 16 times, and checking into a total of 12 different hotels.
October 1937, after a circuitous journey, the Liangs reached Changsha.
Our archaeological during time of peace could be hardly maintained under the new circumstances. We kept as much work as possible with stringent economic means, and only wait to revive it after the war. Our personal life is reduced to a struggle with hardships, which are still bearable. As a woman, I was immediately turned into a pure housewife to work in the 2 rented rooms. Every day is hectic. With a few more air raid alarms, my life can't be fuller.
过去在这个抗战以前呢，我妈家里有厨师，有保姆，照顾我们的生活什么。现在她就全部要承担这些工作。但对他们生活的变化，我觉得他们好像一点都没有这种抱怨的情绪，而是好像觉得这是他们应该学的。
Before long, 1,600 teachers and students from Beiping and Tianjin arrived here. the Republican government decided to establish a temporary university in Changsha. The Liang's old friends now gathered in the city, crowded thanks to the war. They frequented the Liang's house in the evening to discuss the war situation.
我记得每天晚上，他们来讨论了以后，最后走的时候，大家就高唱这个抗日歌、救亡歌曲，父亲乐队指挥。
But before long, an air raid siren pierced the sky over Changsha.
The bomb dropped 15 yards away from the door of our house. No one knows how we managed not being blown to bits. Our house was in pieces just as we hurried downstairs after hearing some hellish crash and boom, for the two bombs first dropped further away from us. It was by sheer instinctive action each of us picked up one child and rushed for the stairs. You must be worried by now, but you must not. If things were to come to the worst for us, we're only in a way being released from the present, rather terrible, strenuous, dark, and unhappy existence. God, what a life!
Blood was spilt for guarding each inch of land. During the battles of Songhu, Taiyuan, and Nanjing, the Chinese army put up heroic and tragic resistance, which nonetheless failed to prevent the advance of the Japanese. Shanghai fell, followed by Nanjing, Hangzhou, and Jinan, while Wuhan, Changsha, and other cities were bombed again and again.
At present, we're packing again. Maybe we'll leave for the difficult 10-day trip by bus to Huiyin on the 2nd of December.
Masses of refugees continued onward, moving toward China's southwest region.
Today, we arrived at Yuanling. The scenery has become increasingly impressive, and I have started to believe that a woman like Cui Cui could exist here.
Traveling through western Hunan, Lin Huiyin thought of the heroine Cui Cui from Shen Chongwen's novel Border City.
The weather couldn't be better. If this journey were not taking place in the middle of a war, if it did not constantly fill our hearts with sorrow and worry, it would be the trip of a lifetime. Don't be pessimistic about the war. We will surely continue to suffer, but we must keep fighting for liberation. People like us are not of much use. Maybe we will perish, but there must be another way. Our country has made progress. With any luck, one day we will break through to a whole new situation in which we will no longer hang our heads in oppression.
The aesthetic pleasure that Lin felt soon died out entirely.
We started at 1 a.m. to get onto the bus, and by 3 a.m. we packed in all our belongings, few enough, and ourselves into the car. And by 10 in the morning, the car finally started moving. Windowless and starterless and everythingless, as every difficulty in climbing even a flat stretch of road, let alone real high dangerous mountain.
Winding through the wet and gloomy mountain roads of the southwest, Lin Huiyin's pneumonia took a turn for the worse. Her high fever prevented them from moving on.
那天的事我还记得很清楚，我们就把这个铺盖卷放在地上，放到大街上。我跟我弟弟、我外婆啊都坐在铺盖卷上。我父亲母亲就去找旅馆。我父亲说呢，他去找旅馆，结果旅馆全住满了，一间空的也没有。而我母亲已经在开始发烧了，怎么办呢？就在这时候，他忽然听见这个旅馆上有一个非常优美的这个小提琴的声音，就是他觉得很奇怪，怎么这个地方有这个西方音乐？他说这个地方怎么还有人拉小提琴拉得这么好？
In a little hotel in Huang County, there were some young trained their way to the Kunming Aviation School. Some of them happened to come from Guangdong, Liang's home province. That night, they made room for the beleaguered Liangs in their limited space. The encounter in Huang County brought the trainee pilots close to the Liangs, who were treated as family in later days. In January 1938, after 39 days of arduous journey, the Liangs arrived in Kunming from Changsha.
Need I tell you that the sunshines here are always extra, specially brilliant. The sky is blue here even at night. Well, white sailing clouds sail always to my satisfaction.
The temporary university established at Changsha also moved to Kunming and became Southwestern Associated University. The Liang's old friends from Beiping. Weekend gatherings in Kunming also included the young pilot trainees they met in Huang County. Soon, Lin's younger brother, Lin Heng, also enrolled in the aviation school. Xiao Chan, a writer, recalled their Kunming parties and said Lin spoke of the deeds of the heroic pilots as passionately as she once spoke of literature. At the graduation ceremony, Liang and Lin played the role of honorary parents of these young men so far away from home. But their troubles had only begun. With prices surging, the future of the Institute looked grim. Soon after they arrived in Kunming, the Fairbanks wrote to inform them that 2 essays of Liang were published in America. During the chaos of war, this not only gave their spirits an important boost, but in more practical terms, the foreign currency royalties gave them a brief respite against the surging inflation. But soon after they reached Kunming, Liang fell ill with intense back pain. The soft tissues around his spine hardened.
在没离开北京以前呢，他发现这个毛病以后啊，就在协和医院看了，就给他做了一个铁架子，就把他这个人给硬撑起来。所以他在衬衫里老是穿着一个铁架子。这个毛病啊，他不能躺着也不能坐着，前后时间有1年的样子，大概1年才慢慢稳定下来了。
The China Foundation decided to continue funding the Institute for Research in Chinese Architecture, which now had only 5 members left. Warfare had driven them to the southwest, which they hadn't visited in their previous 7 years of field research. As soon as they were settled in Kunming, these scholars, inseparable as they were from their work, planned another field trip to examine ancient architecture in the area. This was the last field trip for the Institute. This expedition started in September 1939 and ended in February 1940, taking half a year to finish. During this time, the war entered its period of greatest hardship. The scholars from the Institute, traveling amid the incoming flow of refugees, kept with them special passports issued by the Chongqing government. On Liang's was written, Liang Sicheng, member of the Institute for Research in Chinese Architecture, age 39, hometown Xinhui County, Guangdong, issued to allow for the investigation of ancient architecture. The bearer should be allowed passage upon verification of his identity. Southwest at the end of the 1930s secured a batch of precious data for the study of Chinese architectural history, it left images and photos of relics of ancient architecture, as well as urban life of 50 years ago.
那为什么之前没有意识到有钱的这么多年？
以前啊，一个是他很早的时候就公布为文物保护单位了，国家开始，所以还有一个当地的百姓呢，他对那个还是有一定的信仰。
The invaders pressed forward on all fronts. After taking central China, the Japanese army blockaded marine transportation channels in order to cut off all possible external support. Japan boasted of ending the war in China within half a year. But determined to secure international aid and military materials, China managed to build a 1,000-kilometer-long highway connecting Yunnan and Burma in just 9 months. Through the fusion line, strategic materials poured into Kunming from Burma, turning Kunming into a distribution hub. Soon, the city became a new target for Japanese bombardment, thus part of the front lines of the war.
Dear, dearer, and dearest Wilma and John, I wish to have a troop of secretaries and efficient typewriting machines clicking, loud enough to drown the air raid alarms, which has been our daily music and menace for the last week now. Don't worry, Wilma. We all managed to take things very calmly. After each raid, we remark like experts and say that it has been a very mild one. We generally become very active right after the raid, as if instinctively try to for that loss of life during the previous hours. You will have to guess what I have gone through during a good part of last year, and how different life have been since. And that I still manage to be thinner every day is no surprise. My temper has grown to make up for loss of body weight. Nature can always do many things.
In order to evade the bombing, the Institute moved to Longtou village on the outskirts of Kunming, together with other research institutes of Academia Sinica that had fled to the southwest region. These images from Longtou village, taken by archaeologist Xue Zhongru, have been preserved at the Institute of History and Philology of Academia Sinica in Taiwan. Fu Xinyan, director of the Institute, emphasized the value of photography in research. A photograph from an archaeological dig or ethnographic study, he said, contained more knowledge than thousands of words of description. A decade earlier, the Institute of History and Philology initiated the remarkable excavation of the Huiyin ruins. In its wartime flight, the Institute of History and Philology took with it dozens of cases of precious books and more than 1,000 boxes of excavated relics. These materials supported the ongoing work of the Institute for Research in Chinese Architecture, despite its small scale and limited resources. As a result, the architecture scholars closely followed the Institute of History and Language throughout the war. With urban expansion, this small village, which once lay outside the edge of Kunming, is now part of the city itself. 70 years ago, Longtou village once housed a multitude of top Chinese academic institutes and master scholars.
今天没看到这个， 那碑在中间就把定的了。
哦，什么碑啊？
一个标志碑了，文物标志碑了，就是有这个，你看有这个过去叫挂东起嘛，现在气化一下呢叫爬东起，标志碑在上面。
The scholars who moved here during the war either rented houses or started to build their own to prepare for long-term residence. This courtyard here in Longzhou village was sealed up for years, surrounded by new buildings put up by the villagers. The owner of this courtyard, who lives in the city, gets invited by the Cultural Relic Administration once in a while to come back to receive visitors like us. One of the homes in his courtyard remains the only residence that the two architectural scholars, Liang and Lin, designed and built for themselves in their entire lives.
这个房子嘛，就是没有拆除，我们嘛还是做了一点贡献了。本来这个村子里面住了很多人的，住的你看这个是2、3个林徽因，还有瓦砾，这个瓦砾。 切断山，然后上面是风油兰，这个那边是吴汉，那边是就你刚才讲的什么这个维东跟朱自清，对不对？这一小片的嘛，也在西南里也打过来的，住了很多人。这个村子里面是还有理发柜，这个村子里面大概住了可能有10多家吧。我们现在仅留的呢，可能就是我们这个还有那个啥，这个张应龙的这个是，现在只有2处了，现在。 也只有我们家这个地方跟另外一个叫理发。
那怎么就你们家的可以留下，人家的都拆了呢？
俺们这个要看你自己对这个文物的这个认识的东西嘛，对不对？文物这个东西嘛是不可再生的，你把它拆了就拆了。这个地方很多啊，真的是很多像我们家这种房子，都是前2年就是
不开门也进不来。
装饰嘛，进不来嘛这个地方。
A few years ago, this owner, like other villagers, built a new modern building in the courtyard and planned to demolish the old house once the new one was finished. In 2003, the old house was designated by the city as a protected historical site. The owner, who usually stays downtown, simply locked up the village courtyard that he is too busy to take care of.
那可以看看吧，来里面。
走吧。
结构动过吧？
没动过，记得没动过。
Our house includes 3 large rooms, a kitchen we're principally involved, and a maid's room, which lies vacant, since no servant could be secured all those months now. Though theoretically, we still can afford.
这个地板是当时铺的。
当时铺的，然后这次嘛，一画的房子，这个你看都是过去壁炉啊，这个是。 这个在南方的东西很少的这个。你看它这个是还有个金油林啊，金油林住的是一间。
During the spring, Lao Qin has one extra ear room built, attached to our main house on the side. Thus, the whole of Peitung Buhuten group is at present intact. But heaven knows for how long now. My parents spent their life savings on the house. Even some of Grandma's jewelry was put into this. Mom added some basic decoration to the home, installing a crude wooden floor, putting up a little bookshelf on the wall, and putting down a piece of cloth over the wooden stool beneath it. Mom would often put a big bouquet of wild flowers in a clay vase.
当时我就感觉那个房子马上就感觉非常的，然后现在的话就是非常温馨，就舒服极了。我当时就觉得，那时候我是不太注意这些事儿的，什么建筑了、装修了，我那时候是不太注意这。当时觉得我妈真神，怎么这么一下子就把这么一个破房子啊，搞得这么舒服、这么可爱。只要有一点条件，她就要把自己的生活搞得。
In this cute little sitting room, under a kerosene lamp, Mom used to explain to us the stories of the philosopher Zhuangzi. She also taught us poetry by Li Bai and Du Fu, especially the poems that Du Fu wrote in Sichuan, which felt nearby to us. Mom often took us to the neighboring village to watch the old master craftsman making all kinds of bowls and pots on his wheel. She was amazed by the beautiful shapes that emerged under his hands. She would shout at the craftsman and beg him to stop. The old man, of course, ignored this crazy woman who came from a distant province and kept working on his pots with composure. Every time Mom told this story afterward, she would break out laughing. Their days in exile at Longtou village contained fleeting moments of sunshine for Lin Huiyin.
Your letter came this time a day before the Moon Festival. The weather at this point was turning cool, with more and more autumn glow of flooding light. Scenery was glorious. Everywhere, fragrance edged the air. Wildflowers remind one of thousands of the nicest feelings long forgotten. In the morning or afternoon, the sun steals in curious angles to one's aching sense of awareness of quiet and beauty amid a helpless world of confusion and disaster. And now, it is festival time. It seems more like an irony of logic. Don't like Lao Qin said this.
It was the first time the Liang's children had lived in the countryside. They didn't have to go to school and had their days free to themselves. The daughter kept a diary which detailed her happy life in Longtou village.
One afternoon, Mom lay outside basking in the sun. She asked me if I had done my homework. I said yes. Actually, I only wrote in my diary and did nothing else. She seldom checked on me because she trusted me, but I abused her trust. That was really wrong of me. I wanted to do homework, but I was bewitched by a Kung Fu novel. I wanted to pull myself back, but I couldn't.
当时我妈大概希望我能够主动的给她当个小帮手吧，帮她一点忙。而我呢，我就老看书，那时候爱看小说。
Lin drew a cartoon for her daughter, who was spending all her time reading novels. She wrote, "An avid reader such as yourself must remember not to be like the person in the cartoon, or else at the very least I will never have a son-in-law." The research institutes gradually resumed work, and the children began to enjoy their carefree life in the countryside. But the expanding warfare soon put an end to this. In September 1939, just as the Institute started its study tour of the Southwest, Hitler launched his blitzkrieg attacks in Europe. In June 1940, France was occupied. In September, the French-controlled Indo-Chinese peninsula fell to the Japanese army. Yunnan province, bordering on Vietnam, was in jeopardy. All the research institutes relocated there now had to be moved once again. By then, the Liangs had lived in their new house on which they had spent all their savings for half a year. While the Liangs packed for a new journey, bad news came. Flooding had inundated parts of Tianjin. The drawings and films that the Architecture Institute had stored in the underground vault of the foreign bank had suffered serious water damage.
我这辈子都没看到我父亲流过泪，他是不哭的。我从来没看到我父亲哭，但是那次听到照片，听到他这批资料损失了以后，他跟我母亲都伤心的不得了，我父亲都哭起来了，那时候。
The Institute of History Philology of the Academia Sinica is moving to Sichuan, so we go along too. We are AS Parasite as far as library facilities are concerned. We feel very sad about this moving. It means away from a group of friends we have been with for over 10 years.
Before leaving Kunming, Liang wrote to the Fairbanks for help. he asked if they could recommend his article, In Search of Ancient Architecture in Northern China, to National Geographic magazine. If it was accepted, he asked that they use the royalties for a 2-year subscription to Reader's Digest, 2 years of Architecture Forum, and 1 year of Time and National Geographic.
We are so short of reading matters and the reference books here. We, Lao Jin, Duan Sheng, Phyllis and I and friends shall appreciate it so much if every now and then you'll send us some out-of-date bestsellers that you pick up from some second-hand bookshop. We are thirsty to read things from left to right instead of from top to bottom. While I am typing this, begging for books, I discovered Phyllis writing Wilma for old clothes. It seems we actually turn beggars.
In December 1940, in the depths of winter, the Institute for Research in Chinese Architecture embarked on its journey to Sichuan province, along with other units of Academia Sinica. 3 years ago, these scholars from top academic institutions had moved from Beiping to Kunming. Now, with the heavy loads that supported their intellectual aspirations, they again set foot on the interminable road of exile. As Ziping noted in her diary, her mother took her to buy medicine for her feverish younger brother. They passed by a local Confucius temple.
那个庙已经改成个小学校了，他就一定要去看那个庙。我呢，一去以后，我们刚去了以后，那小孩就来围观，你知道，一大堆小学生把我围起来，我非常就恼火，我坚决不肯进去。我母亲非要进去不可，我非不肯进去。结果我母亲熬不住了，就没有进去吧。后来我母亲回来就发火了。 就是回来就训了我，后来那篇训话我还记在我的这个日记上的，所以现在还有点印象。
Mom said to me, "Why are you so upset? When we come to a place, we need to see it properly. We must visit the county government, the Confucius temple, and also appreciate the layout of the streets and the construction of the city walls. I want you just to check out what is for sale in the shops."
我当时我心里很好笑，我觉得我才11岁那个时候，还不到11岁，我觉得跟我说这有点对牛弹琴呢。我觉得我又不是搞古建考察的，我又不搞你们这一套，我怎么会懂呢？但我后来我想，他那天呢比较恼火，是因为我父亲不在。我相信那天要是我父亲在，他两个一定进去大大的考察一番。反正。 我妈就是这么一个人。
After 15 days of travel, on December 13th, 1940, they arrived at Lijiang, a small town on the upper reaches of the Yangtze River, which could not even be found on the maps of the time. Today, Lijiang has become noted as a historical site in southeast Sichuan. Back then, when the nation's fate was hanging by a thread, the townsfolk of Lijiang, cordial and honest, warmly welcomed the exiled scholars from afar.
主要是看抗战文化和重建大学者的旧地，主要是这个一面。
Overnight, the sleepy ancient town with a population of just 3,000 became host to several academic institutions with nearly 10,000 people. Lijuang, along with the cities of Chongqing, Kunming, and Chengdu, became one of the 4 cultural centers of the War of Resistance. Apart from the Institute for Research in Chinese Architecture, the 3 other Academia Sinica institutes and the Preparatory Committee for the National Museum, other academic organizations such as Tongji University and the Literature Institute of Jinling University also moved here. In the area of Lijuang called Chestnut Hollow stood a stone tablet that was once destroyed and then restored. It was left by the Institute of History and Philology of Academia Sinica when it moved away after the war was won. The inscription on it records the collective gratitude of the research institutes for 6 years of nurturing and support from Lijuang's people during the war. About 1 kilometer from Lijuang is a place called Moon Field, where the Institute for Research in Chinese Architecture was located. The institute, totaling over 10 persons, including all members and their families, rented this courtyard with its rustic homes. Restored by the Tsinghua University Department of Architecture, it is now a nationally protected historical site. On the left side was the Liang's home. From their arrival at the end of 1940 through the end of the war, the Liang stayed in this courtyard for nearly 6 years.
此后呢，被评为了国家级重点文物保护单位。我们进来看看这里吧。创办人朱其乾，文献部主任刘伦尊，诗人、文学家、艺术家，还有他的长相美女。但是他美中不足的地方就是得了一种病，叫做肺结核。林徽因母亲的房间，林徽因呢，她对，相当于说清华大学建筑学院的前身在我们李庄这个地方。因为这个客厅里面呢接待过很多重要客人，包括国学大师的傅斯年、考古之父李济。这个呢就是为了林徽因一辈子没有娶妻的金岳霖教授。那我们需要照相的，我们照照片好吗？然后我们几分钟以后返回上车，浏览下一个景点。
Not long after their arrival in Lijuang, Lin Huiyin fell ill with tuberculosis. She would spend most of the next 6 years in bed.
那时候李庄那个地方呢，也没有水，没有自来水，也没有电，所以你也没有医院，所以任何治疗的条件，当时这个肺病也没有任何特效药可以吃。我母亲呢，我记得那个时候病的是很可怜，那个时候病了以后晚上这个盗汗，就出汗出得很厉害。我早上起来看到这个擦汗的手巾呢，一块一块的晾在那里。有时候一个早上起来可以看他晾7、8块在那个地方。他就晚上一个人挣扎，反正是那时候确实是我想他是很，我那时候我常常觉得他可能不行了，我很怕我母亲那个时候要离开我们了，有时候真的很害怕，有时候害怕的自己一个人偷偷的哭，那个时候。
By early 1941, the Liangs were financially strapped. From January 1st to the Spring Festival, as the daughter recorded in her diary, she went every day to the dock on the riverside to wait for her father's return. When the family had left Kunming, he had had a foot infection with tetanus, so he had to stay behind for treatment. After he recovered, he went to Chongqing to raise funds on behalf of the Institute.
Dad, why haven't you come back yet? Tomorrow will be New Year's Eve. I leaned against the desk, missing Dad, wishing for his arrival tomorrow or the day after.
I did not get back from Chongqing till April 14th to find her much sicker than what she told me in her letters. House and kitchen and servant all nothing in proper order yet. It is painful to see her sick in bed for months in such conditions. It is too bad that my article was rejected by the NGM. I make no denial that I sent my article in order to earn a little extra money. We are in the midst of a very vicious inflation. A little foreign exchange does help to tie over the two ends and sometimes even give a little sense of security to fall upon. Your gifts, 2 checks, such deep, genuine kindness and affection from what seems now almost like another world we could but accept with the deepest gratitude and appreciation.
When Liang Sicheng finally rejoined the family, he brought bad news that only aggravated their misery. Lin Huiyin's younger brother, a young pilot who had graduated from the Kunming Aviation School, had been killed in an aerial battle. In fact, soon after they had arrived in Kunming, the Liangs began to receive parcels from the aviation school, left behind by the young pilots befriended during their long journey. The pilots had been killed in the war. Their photographs, music records, and even their gramophone were all mailed to Liang and Lin, their honorary parents.
弟弟，我没有适合时代的语言来哀悼你的死，它是时代向你的要求，简单的，你给了。这冷酷简单的壮烈，是时代的诗。假使在这不可免的真实上，多给了悲哀，我想呼喊。 那时，你自己也明了，因为你走得太早，太早了，弟弟。难为你的勇敢，机械的落伍，你的机会太惨。I tell you, these young boys are courageous and pure-hearted. With very direct and simple faith in our country and its war. They are trained to use their skills simply and to give up their lives simply if it need be. One of them I wrote to you about, who plays the violin very well, a most affectionate and willing one, is now engaged to be married. Don't ask me what is going to happen to his girl if he marries and if something happens to him. We just can't answer things like that. 你相信，你也做了，最后一切你交出。我既完全明白，为何我还为着你哭，只因你是个孩子，却没有留什么给自己。 小时，我盼着你的幸福，你的安全。今天，你没有儿女牵挂，需要抚恤同安慰。而万千国人向已忘掉，你死是为了谁？